You hear these words all the time, right? Artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning. They're all over your social media, they're powering your movie recommendations, they're everywhere. But what do they actually mean? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on all these buzzwords. We're going to build a really clear picture of how this tech works, from its very first philosophical questions right up to how it's affecting you right now. So, let's dive in.
This is the question that kicked everything off. Long before any of us had smartphones, computing pioneers like Alan Turing were already wrestling with this huge idea. Could we actually build a machine that thinks? It's a question that has fueled decades of innovation, and it's the perfect place for us to start. So how in the world do you even measure thinking? Well, back in 1950, Alan Turing came up with a really clever idea, the Turing test. Just imagine you're in a chat room with two others. One's a person, one's a machine. You can ask them anything you want. If, by the end, you can't tell which one is the computer, then that machine has passed the test. This really became the first serious benchmark for machine intelligence. It was a way to ask, can a machine act so human-like that we can't tell the difference?
Okay, to understand all the moving parts, we have to start with the big picture, and the biggest, broadest idea of them all is artificial intelligence. This is our foundation.
At its heart, AI is really the whole field dedicated to making intelligent machines. It's the science of building computer systems that can do things we normally associate with the human mind. Things like recognizing patterns, making decisions, and solving tricky problems. You can think of AI as the ultimate goal. It's the giant umbrella that covers everything else we're going to talk about today.
Now, this is a really important distinction. The AI we all interact with every single day, your Siri, your Alexa, even the tech in self-driving cars, that's all considered weak or narrow AI. Don't get me wrong, it's incredibly powerful, but it's built for one specific job. Strong AI, on the other hand, is the stuff of science fiction, at least for now. That's the idea of a machine with the same level of intelligence as a human, something that could learn pretty much any task we can. As of today, no one's actually built one.
So, if most of what we have is this narrow AI, how do we get it to work so well? Well, that brings us to our next layer down, machine learning. This is the engine that's powering almost all the AI you see out there. It's the how behind the what. Think about traditional programming for a second. A developer has to sit down and write explicit rules for every single possibility. With machine learning, we flip that whole idea on its head. We don't write the rules. Instead, we give the machine a ton of data and let it figure out the rules for itself. It learns and gets better all on its own, just from experience. So how does this learning actually happen? Well, it's pretty much a four-step loop. First, it all starts with data. And I mean a lot of data. Then you choose a model, which is just a fancy word for the algorithm you're going to use. The real magic happens during training, where the model sifts through all that data to find patterns. And once it's trained, it's ready to predict, to make smart guesses about new information it's never seen before. That's the whole process in a nutshell.
And not all learning is the same. There are basically three main flavors. With supervised learning, the data is all labeled. Think of it like flashcards for the machine. It learns to match the right answer to the right card. In unsupervised learning, there are no labels. The machine's job is to just find hidden patterns on its own, like grouping customers together based on their shopping habits. And then there's reinforcement learning, where the machine learns by trial and error. It gets rewards for good moves and penalties for bad ones, kind of like teaching a dog a new trick.
And that brings us to our third and deepest layer, deep learning. We've gone from the big idea of AI to the engine of machine learning, and now we're getting to a technique that's inspired by the most complex thing we know of, the human brain.
Deep learning is a really powerful kind of machine learning that uses something called an artificial neural network. And the inspiration for that is, you guessed it, the neurons in our own heads. The deep part just means that these networks have lots and lots of layers of these artificial neurons, which lets them tackle incredibly complicated problems.
So here's the key idea. A deep neural network doesn't try to solve a huge problem all at once. Instead, it breaks it down into a whole series of smaller, simpler tasks. Each layer in the network kind of specializes in one small part of the problem, and by working together, they can solve some amazingly complex stuff.
Let's make this really concrete. How would a network see a square? Well, the very first layer might just look for simple things like straight lines or edges. Then, the next layer up takes that info and checks, okay, are those lines connected to form a closed shape? A deeper layer might then check for things like right angles and equal sides. And finally, the last layer puts it all together and makes the call, yep, it's a square. That's exactly how it works, breaking a big problem into tiny, manageable steps. Okay, so we've gone from the huge concept of AI all the way down to the nuts and bolts of deep learning. But this isn't just abstract theory. Let's bring it all back home and look at where this technology is already showing up in your world every single day. Seriously? Think about it. When Netflix recommends a new show that you end up loving, that's machine learning, finding patterns in what people watch. When you ask Siri for the weather, that's deep learning, figuring out what you're saying. That spam filter that keeps your inbox clean, classic machine learning. From fraud alerts on your credit card to the ads that sometimes feel like they're reading your mind, this tech is already woven deep into the fabric of our lives. We've talked about the what and the how, but we can't really ignore the big what if. All of this progress has led some of the smartest people in the world, like the brilliant physicist Stephen Hawking, to give some pretty serious warnings about where this could all lead, especially when it comes to that theoretical, human-level, strong AI. So we end right where we began, with a really big question. We started by asking if a machine can think. But now, after seeing just how far we've come, we're left with an even bigger one. If, or maybe when, we finally create an intelligence that's smarter than us, what happens then? That's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me.